The morning sun rose over Geneva like it had for thousands of years. But this day was different. This day, the whole galaxy was watching. President Daniel Harris stood at the podium inside the Great Hall of the Unified Nations Summit. Flags from every country on Earth hung behind him, and floating screens carried his image to billions of humans across the planet and the colonies. But the most important audience was not human at all. 12 alien species had sent their diplomats to witness this moment, and countless more watched through the Galactic Assembly's broadcast network. Daniel Harris was not a tall man. He was not loud or aggressive. He had gray hair, kind eyes, and a voice that made people feel safe. He had led humanity through difficult times with patience and wisdom. Today, he hoped to lead them into a new era of peace. Friends of Earth and friends among the stars, he began, his voice calm and warm. We come to you not as conquerors, not as beggars, but as neighbors. Humanity wishes to trade, to learn, and to grow alongside you. We offer our hand in friendship to all who would take it. In the back of the hall, Ambassador Drelln of the Vraxian Dominion shifted uncomfortably. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 eyes that blinked in sequence. He had warned his leaders about this moment. He had told them that humans were not the primitive species they believed. But High Overlord Catherine did not listen. Far away, in the dark throne room of Raxus Prime, High Overlord Catherine watched the broadcast with disgust. His scaled face twisted into something like a smile, but there was no warmth in it. They dare to speak as equals, he hissed to his advisors. These creatures from that tiny wet rock, they have been in space for barely 2 centuries, and they think they can sit at our table? Commander Zithis, his military chief, stepped forward. My overlord, perhaps we should simply ignore them. They are beneath our notice. No, Catherine said slowly. Ignoring them gives them legitimacy. We must remind the galaxy what happens to species that forget their place. He pressed a button on his throne. Somewhere in the void of space, a cloaked Vraxian warship received its orders. Back on Earth, President Harris was finishing his speech. The audience applauded. Diplomats from friendly species nodded in approval. Even some of the more cautious ones seemed willing to consider his words. Hope filled the great hall like sunlight. Then the sky turned white. The Vraxian ship that cloaked directly above Geneva. It fired once. A beam of purple energy cut through the clouds and struck the heart of the city. The great hall, the president, thousands of innocent people, and diplomats from 12 species vanished in a flash of terrible light. The blast wave shattered windows for 50 miles. The sound reached the mountains. And then there was silence. Admiral Catherine Morrison was aboard the orbital station Unity when the alarms began screaming. She ran to the command center, her boots echoing on metal floors. When she saw the footage from Geneva, she stopped moving. She stopped breathing. The city was gone. A crater of melted glass and ash sat where millions of people had lived just moments before. Emergency broadcasts flooded every channel. Screaming, crying, confusion. Admiral, her aide said carefully. What are your orders? Catherine Morrison was 54 years old. She had served in 3 conflicts and never lost a battle. She had shaken President Harris's hand just last week. He had smiled and told her to take care of his people. She stood perfectly still for 60 seconds. No one dared to speak. Then she opened her eyes, and there was something in them that made everyone in the room step back. Wake them all up, she said quietly. Ma'am? Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have built and hidden, every plan we made and prayed we would never use. Her voice did not shake. Wake them all up. The order spread across Earth like fire. In mountain bunkers that had been sealed for decades, lights flickered on. In orbital shipyards that officially did not exist, engines began to hum. Soldiers who had retired years ago found messages on their devices with just 2 words: report immediately. The galaxy watched Earth with curiosity. Some expected tears and surrender. The Vraxians expected begging. Other species expected a small, angry response that would give Catherine an excuse to crush them completely. None of them expected what happened next. For 3 hours, Earth's official channels went silent. No demands, no threats, no crying, just silence. Then, at exactly midnight Earth Standard Time, every screen and speaker in the galaxy that could receive a transmission displayed the same image. A simple view of Earth from space, blue and green and white, beautiful and small against the darkness. And then a voice spoke. It was not Admiral Morrison. It was not any general or president. It was a child, maybe 10 years old, reading words that someone had written for her. You killed our leader today. You killed our friends. You killed children who were visiting the city with their schools. You killed mothers and fathers who were just walking to work. The child paused. Her voice did not shake either. We did not want this war. We asked for peace. We offered friendship. You answered with fire. Another pause. So now we will answer. The transmission ended. The image of Earth faded to black. Across the galaxy, species that had dismissed humans as young and harmless began checking their defenses. Ambassador Drown closed his 4 eyes and whispered a prayer to gods he had not believed in for years. On Vraxis Prime, High Overlord Catherine laughed. Pathetic. They sent a child to threaten us. This will be even easier than I thought. Commander Zithis nodded in agreement, but something cold moved through his stomach. He had studied human history as a curiosity once. He remembered reading about what humans did when their homes were attacked. He remembered words like total war and unconditional surrender. He said nothing. His overlord would not want to hear it. On the orbital station Unity, Admiral Morrison stood before her commanders. Behind her, a screen showed a live count of ships and soldiers reporting for duty. The numbers climbed every second. They think our silence means we are broken, she said calmly. They think our grief has made us weak. They think that killing one good man has ended our story. She turned to face the screen. The number of active warships had just passed 300. Let them keep thinking that, she said, until it is too late. The stars had never seemed so cold. But somewhere in the darkness, a tempest was beginning to form, and the galaxy would never be the same again. 30 days passed after Geneva burned. 30 days of silence from Earth. The Galactic Assembly sent messages of concern, then messages of curiosity, then messages demanding a response. Earth answered none of them. Ships that approached human space were politely turned away at the border by automated defense platforms. No explanation was given. High Overlord Catherine grew more confident with each passing day. You see, he told his council, they are paralyzed by grief. Their famous human emotions have destroyed them. By the time they recover, we will have built a fleet large enough to take their worlds one by one. Commander Zithis nodded, but he had not slept well in weeks. His spies near human space reported strange things. Energy readings that made no sense. Ships moving in patterns that looked random but felt deliberate. Transmissions that his code breakers could not understand. They are planning something, he said carefully. Of course they are planning, Catherine replied with a wave of his clawed hand. They are planning their surrender. What else can they do? But behind Earth's wall of silence, humanity was not surrendering. Humanity was waking up. In a secret facility deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Dr. Linda Shaw had not seen sunlight in 29 days. Her team worked in shifts around the clock, sleeping on cots next to their equipment, eating meals without tasting them. They had one job: finish Project Tempest. The weapon was not a bomb. It was not a beam. It was something far more devastating. Project Tempest could destabilize the subspace frequencies that made faster-than-light travel possible. It could collapse jump gates. It could trap an entire fleet in normal space, unable to retreat, unable to call for help. On the 28th day, Linda ran the final test. The numbers on her screen turned green dot. She picked up her communicator with shaking hands. Admiral Morrison. It works. There was a pause on the other end. Then Morrison's voice, steady as stone. Good. Rest for 6 hours. Then prepare for deployment. Linda looked at her exhausted team. Some of them were crying with relief. Some were already asleep. She smiled for the first time in a month. We did it, she whispered to herself. We actually did it. Across the planet and beyond, humanity's true strength was revealing itself. The galaxy believed humans had perhaps 50 warships capable of interstellar combat. The real number was 500, hidden in shipyards disguised as mining stations, inside hollowed-out asteroids, beneath the surfaces of moons. For decades, Earth's leaders had quietly prepared for the day when someone would test them. They had hoped that day would never come. But they were not foolish enough to bet everything on hope. Colonel Ryan Torres stood in the hangar on Mars, looking at the soldiers assembled before him. These were not regular troops. These were special forces, the best of the best, volunteers, who had signed up for missions that most people would call suicide. I will not lie to you, Ryan said, his voice echoing off the metal walls. This will be the hardest fight of your lives. Many of us will not come home. But every one of you knows why we are here. They took something from us. They took someone from us. And we are going to make them understand that this was a mistake. A woman in the front row raised her hand. Sir, when do we leave? Ryan recognized her. Sergeant Maria Vance. Her husband and daughter had been visiting Geneva that morning. They had gone to see the historic buildings. They never came home. 2 days, Sergeant, Ryan replied. 2 days. Maria nodded once. Her face showed nothing, but her eyes burned with a fire that Ryan had seen before, in the eyes of soldiers who had nothing left to lose. On the orbital station, Unity, Admiral Morrison met with Ambassador Drown in a small private room. The Vraxian had escaped from his homeworld through smugglers and back channels, risking everything to bring humanity a warning. High Overlord Catherine is building an invasion fleet, Drown said, his 4 eyes blinking nervously. 3,000 ships. He plans to crush your species completely. He wants to make an example of you. Morrison studied the alien's face. Why are you telling us this? You are Vraxian. These are your people. Drown was quiet for a moment. My people have become something I do not recognize. Catherine speaks of honor and strength, but he murders diplomats and children. That is not strength. That is cowardice. He met her eyes with all 4 of his own. I do not want my species remembered as monsters. Morrison nodded slowly. Then help us end this quickly. Help us minimize the death on both sides. I will do what I can, Drown promised. But you should know that most Vraxians believe you are weak. They think your silence is proof that you have accepted defeat. A small smile crossed Morrison's face. It was not a warm smile. Good. Let them keep believing that. The next morning, Earth's silence finally broke. Every human ship, soldier, and weapon moved at once. 500 warships emerged from their hiding places and formed into fleets. Transport vessels loaded with soldiers and equipment launched toward the assembly points. Communication networks that had been dark for a month suddenly blazed with encrypted traffic. The galaxy watched in shock. Species that had written humanity off as finished scrambled to reassess. Military analysts across 100 worlds stared at their screens in disbelief. That is not possible, Council Speaker Velness said in the Galactic Assembly chambers, watching the footage. No species can hide that much military power. Our intelligence said they had 50 ships at most. Her aide checked the latest reports and swallowed hard. Speaker, the count is now at 473 confirmed warships, and more are still appearing. On Vraxis Prime, Commander Zithis burst into the throne room without waiting for permission. My overlord, we have a problem. Catherine looked up from his meal, annoyed. What problem could possibly be worth interrupting me? Zithis activated a holographic display. It showed Earth's fleet moving through space like a swarm of angry insects, growing larger with every passing hour. They were not broken, Zithis said, his voice barely above a whisper. They were preparing. Catherine stared at the display. For the first time in many years, something cold touched his heart, something that felt almost like fear. Prepare our defenses, he said quietly, and contact our allies. We may need them. But deep down, he was beginning to realize what Commander Zithis had known for weeks. The humans had never been weak. They had never been primitive. They had simply been patient dot, and now their patience had ended. The Naris system sat at the edge of Vraxian space. It was a quiet place, home to 3 mining stations and a small military outpost. The soldiers stationed there considered it a boring assignment. Nothing ever happened in Narith Dot until the sky filled with human ships. Commander Thalos was drinking his morning nutrient blend when the alarm started screaming. He spilled the drink down his uniform as he ran to the command center. Report, he shouted. Sir, we have contacts emerging from jump space. Many contacts. The young officer's voice was shaking. The system is counting. 50 ships. No, wait. 100. 200. Thalos felt his blood turn cold. That cannot be right. Check your equipment. I have checked 3 times, sir. The count is now at 300 and still rising. They are human warships. On the bridge of the USS Stormbreaker, Captain Nathan Cole stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the Vraxian outpost grow larger on the main screen. He was 41 years old, with short brown hair and calm gray eyes. He had flown combat missions for 15 years, but nothing like this. All ships report ready, Captain, his first officer announced. Fleet Admiral Morrison is requesting confirmation of target lock. Nathan nodded. Confirm target lock. All weapons hot. Tell the fleet we fire on her command. He thought about what waited for them beyond this system. He thought about President Harris, who had once visited his ship and thanked every crew member personally. He thought about the thousands who died in Geneva. Admiral Morrison's voice came through the fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Morrison. The Vraxians believe we are weak. They believe we are broken. Today, we show them how wrong they are. Fire. 500 human warships unleashed their weapons at once. The Vraxian outpost lasted exactly 7 minutes. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. Humanity had struck back, and they had struck hard. The border defenses that the Vraxians had considered unbreakable crumbled like sandcastles against the tide. Colonel Ryan Torres led his ground teams onto the surface of a Vraxian communications relay station. The fighting was brutal but brief. Human soldiers moved through the corridors like ghosts, clearing room after room with terrible efficiency. Control room secured, Sergeant Maria Vance reported, standing over the bodies of the station's defenders. Her rifle was still smoking. Ryan nodded and approached the main console. Get Dr. Shaw on the line. We need her to take over their broadcast systems. Minutes later, humanity's message began transmitting on every Vraxian military frequency. It was short and simple. This is not war. This is consequence. The words repeated on a loop. Vraxian commanders across a dozen systems heard them and felt something they had not felt in generations. Fear. Commander Zithis watched the battle reports come in from his command. Ship. Every update was worse than the last. outpost after outpost falling, fleet after fleet being pushed back. The humans fought like nothing he had ever seen. "They do not retreat," one of his officers said, his voice full of confusion. "We destroyed 3 of their ships in the Korath engagement. They did not even slow down. They kept coming." "That is what humans do," Zithis replied quietly. "They keep coming. It is their most dangerous trait." He made a decision that could cost him his career, possibly his life. He ordered a full retreat from the border territories. "Pull everyone back to the core systems. We cannot win these small battles. We must concentrate our forces." The retreat surprised the galaxy. The mighty Vraxian dominion running from the species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers. Council Speaker Velmus watched the footage with growing amazement. "They truly underestimated the humans," she murmured to her advisors. Everyone did. On the ground, Maria Vance and her squad pushed through a Vraxian city that had been abandoned in the retreat. Buildings towered around them, alien and strange, but Maria felt nothing but cold focus. They found a group of Vraxian prisoners in a holding cell. Captured soldiers who had surrendered rather than die. One of them, an officer with fresh wounds on his face, spat at Maria's feet. "Human animal," he hissed. "You fight without honor. You feel too much. Your emotions make you weak." Maria looked at him for a long moment. Then she knelt down to meet his eyes. "You are right," she said softly. "We feel too much. We love our families too much. We remember our dead too clearly. We hold on to our pain like a weapon." She leaned closer. "My husband's name was Carlos. My daughter's name was Sophia. She was 7 years old. She liked to draw pictures of butterflies." The Vraxian officer said nothing. "Emotions are exactly why we are here," Maria continued. "You should have remembered that before your overlord gave the order to fire." She stood up and walked away, leaving the prisoners for the processing teams. She did not look back. Back on Vraxis Prime, High Overlord Kethron listened to the reports in growing fury. His perfect plan was falling apart. The primitive humans were winning. How was this possible? He roared at his council. They were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to surrender. Ambassador Drown, who had been secretly returned to the homeworld by human forces specifically for this moment, spoke up from the shadows. "They tried to warn you, my overlord. Everyone tried to warn you. Humans are not what they appear to be." Catherine's eyes fixed on Drelln with murderous rage. You have been helping them. Guards, take this traitor to the cells." As the guards dragged Drelln away, he called out one final warning. "Their fleet is already on its way here, Catherine. They are coming for you, and nothing you do will stop them." On the bridge of the Stormbreaker, Captain Cole received the latest intelligence. The Vraxian main fleet was assembling at their capital world. Over 2,000 ships, preparing for the final battle. He forwarded the report to Admiral Morrison and received her response almost immediately. "Good. Now we know exactly where they will be. Continue advance. We end this at Vraxis Prime." Nathan looked out at the stars, thinking about everything that had brought them here. A leader murdered. A city destroyed. A species underestimated. The Tempest was gathering strength. And soon it would break upon the heart of the Dominion itself. Vraxis Prime hung in space like a gray pearl wrapped in silver rings. The Vraxian homeworld had never been attacked in over 3,000 years of recorded history. Today, that history would end. Admiral Catherine Morrison stood on the bridge of her command ship, watching the planet grow larger on her screen. Around her, 500 human warships held formation, their weapons charged and ready. Ahead of them, the Vraxian armada waited. Over 2,000 ships, arranged in defensive layers around their homeworld. "They outnumber us 4-1, her tactical officer reported. Morrison nodded calmly. "I can count, Lieutenant. Dr. Shaw, is Project Tempest ready? Linda Shaw's voice came through the communication channel, tired but determined. Ready on your command, Admiral. Once activated, every jump gate within 10 light years will collapse. Nothing gets in or out. Good. Morrison opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. In a few minutes, we will engage the largest enemy force in human history. Some of us will not survive this day. But every one of you knows why we are here. We are not here for conquest. We are not here for glory. We are here to show the galaxy that attacking humanity has consequences. She paused. Activate Project Tempest. Across the system, the jump gates flickered and died. The massive structures that allowed faster-than-light travel simply stopped working. The Vraxian reinforcement fleets that had been racing to help suddenly found themselves stranded, unable to reach the battle in time. High Overlord Kethron watched from his palace as the jump gates collapsed. For the first time, real fear crept into his heart. They trapped us, he whispered. They trapped us in our own system. He activated a broadcast to all Vraxian ships. Warriors of the Dominion, the humans have come to our doorstep. They think their tricks and their numbers will defeat us. Show them the strength of Vraxis. Show them why we have ruled this sector for millennia. Destroy them all. The Vraxian fleet surged forward. The human fleet met them. Space turned into chaos. Captain Nathan Cole pushed the Stormbreaker through a wall of enemy fire, his ship shaking with every impact. Target that command vessel, he shouted. Take out their coordination. His weapons officer fired. A Vraxian cruiser exploded in a ball of orange flame. Two more took its place. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Ships died by the dozens every minute. Explosions lit up the void like stars being born and dying in seconds. The humans fought with desperate fury. The Vraxians fought with the desperation of defenders protecting their home. On the planet's surface, Colonel Ryan Torres led his ground teams toward the planetary defense grid. If they could disable it, the fleet could move closer and strike directly at the palace. Enemy position ahead. Someone shouted. Ryan ducked behind a collapsed wall as energy beams scorched the air above his head. Return fire. Push through. The ground assault was brutal. Vraxian soldiers defended every meter of their homeworld with everything they had. But human soldiers kept coming, driven by months of grief and rage. In orbit, the Stormbreaker took a critical hit. Fire erupted across 3 decks. The main engines failed. Sir, we're dead in space, the helmsman reported. His voice steady despite the chaos. Nathan Cole looked at his dying ship. Then, at the Vraxian command vessel that coordinated their fleet. It was close. Very close. An idea formed in his mind. All hands, abandon ship, he ordered. Get to the escape pods, now. His first officer grabbed his arm. Captain, what are you doing? My job. Nathan pulled free and moved to the helm controls. Tell the Admiral that I am sorry I will miss the victory party. As escape pods launched from the Stormbreaker, Nathan aimed his crippled ship directly at the Vraxian command vessel. The engines were dead, but momentum carried him forward. The Vraxians realized what was happening too late. They tried to turn, tried to dodge, but the Stormbreaker was already on top of them. The impact was tremendous. Both ships crumpled together in a twisted mass of metal and fire. The Vraxian coordination network went dark. Their organized defense turned into confused chaos. Admiral Morrison watched the sacrifice with tears in her eyes. Damn you, Cole, she whispered. Then, louder, all ships, press the attack. Their command structure is broken. Break through to the planet. The human fleet surged forward through the gap that Nathan Cole had created with his life. On the ground, Sergeant Maria Vance led her squad through the streets of the capital city. Buildings burned around them. Raxian civilians ran for shelter. But Maria had eyes only for one target: the Overlord's palace. Contact left. Someone shouted. Maria spun and fired, dropping a Raxian soldier before he could shoot. 2 more came around a corner. She eliminated them both. "Keep moving," she ordered. "We stop when the job is done." They reached the palace steps just as the last defenders fell. Maria pulled a folded cloth from her pack. It was a human flag, one that Carlos had kept in their home. She had brought it with her across the stars. She planted it on the steps of the Vraxian palace and stood back to look at it. The flag rippled in the alien wind. "This is for you," she said quietly. "This is for both of you." In orbit, the Vraxian fleet was breaking. Ships began surrendering as word spread that the command vessel was destroyed and ground forces had reached the palace. Admiral Morrison accepted each surrender personally, treating the captives with dignity. "The war is not over," she announced to her fleet. "But the battle is won. Move to secure positions and prepare for the next phase." Deep in the palace, Colonel Torres found Ambassador Drell in a prison cell. The Vraxian diplomat was bruised and beaten but alive. "We need your help," Ryan said, unlocking the cell. "Can you convince your people to stop fighting?" Drell stood slowly, his 4 eyes filled with something like hope. "I can try, but you must promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that when this is over, you will not become what we were. Promise me that humanity will show mercy." Ryan thought about Geneva. He thought about Carlos and Sofia Vance. He thought about all the funerals he would attend when this was over. "We will show mercy," he said finally. "But first, we need Catherine." "Where is he?" Drell's expression darkened. He retreated to his throne room when the palace defenses fell. He has sealed himself inside. He will not surrender. Ryan nodded and raised his communicator. "Admiral, we have the palace. But Catherine has barricaded himself in the throne room." Morrison's reply was immediate. "Secure the area. I am coming down personally. This ends now." The throne room doors were thick and strong, built to withstand siege. Behind them, High Overlord Catherine sat on his ancient seat of power, watching his empire crumble on a dozen screens. He had been so certain, so confident. Humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be emotional and soft. How had everything gone so wrong? The doors began to shake as human forces brought cutting equipment. Catherine straightened his robes and waited. If this was the end, he would face it with the dignity of his ancestors. But deep in his heart, he knew the truth. He had awakened something terrible, something the galaxy would remember for 1,000 years. The humans had come for justice, and they would not leave until they had it. The cutting tools worked for 3 hours before the throne room doors finally collapsed. Smoke and dust filled the air as Admiral Catherine Morrison stepped through the opening. Flanked by Colonel Torres and a squad of human soldiers, High Overlord Catherine sat on his throne, watching them approach. He did not rise. He did not beg. His face showed nothing but cold pride. "So," he said slowly, "the animals have finally reached the heart of the Dominion. Congratulations. You have destroyed 3,000 years of civilization." Morrison stopped a few meters from the throne. "We did not come here to destroy civilization. We came here for you. And what will you do now? Execute me in front of your cameras? Make a spectacle of my death to satisfy your human need for revenge?" Catherine's voice dripped with contempt. "Go ahead. Prove to the galaxy that you are exactly what I always said you were. Savages dressed in technology you barely understand." Morrison studied him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "No," she said simply. "We are not going to kill you." Catherine's 4 eyes blinked in surprise. What? You killed our leader to prove your strength. You murdered innocents to send a message. Morrison's voice was steady, her eyes locked on his. We defeated your fleets and captured your world, but we are not going to become you. You will stand trial before the Galactic Assembly. The whole galaxy will see your crimes. And then you will spend the rest of your long life watching everything you built transform into something better. For the first time, real fear showed on Catherine's face. Death he could accept, but this, to be humiliated before the galaxy, to watch his legacy crumble, to live with his failure, this was worse than any execution. You cannot do this, he whispered. We already have. Morrison nodded to her soldiers. Take him. The trial of High Overlord Catherine was broadcast across every inhabited world in the galaxy. For 17 days, evidence was presented. Witnesses testified. The assassination of President Harris was shown in detail, along with the deaths of thousands of innocent beings from a dozen species. Catherine tried to defend himself. He spoke of Raxian supremacy, of the need to control lesser species, of humanity's threat to galactic order. But his words sounded hollow in the face of the evidence. Council Speaker Velnus delivered the verdict personally. High Overlord Catherine, you have been found guilty of murder, acts of war against civilian populations, and crimes against the peace of the galaxy. You are sentenced to permanent imprisonment on the station known as the Grey Watch. You will live. You will watch, but you will never again influence the affairs of any species. As guards led Catherine away, Ambassador Drelln rose to address the assembly. The new leader of the Vraxian people looked tired but hopeful. My people made a terrible mistake, he said. We allowed fear and pride to turn us into something shameful. But with the help of humanity and the assembly, we will rebuild. We will become worthy of our place among the stars. This I promise. The assembly voted unanimously to accept the reformed Vraxian government. The war was officially over. On Earth, the memorials began. A new park was built where Geneva had stood. At its center was a wall of names, every person who died that morning carved into white stone. President Daniel Harris was at the top, but he was far from alone. Admiral Morrison attended the dedication ceremony. She stood before the wall in her dress uniform, her face showing the exhaustion of months of war and the grief she had pushed aside to do her duty. Captain Nathan Cole's name was on a separate memorial, one dedicated to those who gave their lives during the campaign. Morrison had written his commendation personally. He saw what needed to be done, and he did it without hesitation. That is what makes us human. In the crowd, Maria Vance stood with her squad. They were all here, all the soldiers who had followed her through the fires of Raxus Prime. She looked at Carlos and Sophia's names on the wall and felt something she had not felt since they died. Peace. Not happiness. Not closure, but peace. The knowledge that she had done everything she could, that their deaths meant something, that the galaxy would never forget what happened when humanity was pushed too far. Dr. Linda Shaw received the highest civilian honor Earth could give. She accepted it with quiet grace and immediately returned to her laboratory. There was still work to do. There would always be work to do. Colonel Torres retired from active duty 3 months after the war ended. He opened a small farm in Montana and spent his days growing vegetables and watching the sunset. Sometimes other veterans came to visit. They would sit together in silence, comfortable with people who understood without words. Ambassador Drelln kept his promise. Over the following years, the Vraxian Dominion transformed into a republic. They opened their borders. They joined trade agreements. They even sent their first ambassador to Earth, a young Vraxian named Thelis, who had grown up hearing stories of the war and wanted to be part of the healing. The galaxy changed in ways both large and small. Species that had ignored humanity now sought their friendship. Trade routes expanded. Scientific cooperation increased. Earth became one of the most influential voices in the Galactic Assembly, not through threats, but through the respect they had earned. Council Speaker Velmus delivered a speech on the 10-year anniversary of the war's end. Her words were carried to every corner of the galaxy. "We have learned many lessons from the human tempest," she said. "We learned that strength is not measured only in ships and weapons. We learned that unity in grief can become unity in purpose. And we learned that those who choose mercy when they could choose revenge are the strongest of all." She paused, looking directly at the human delegation. "But perhaps the most important lesson is this: never mistake silence for weakness. And never assume that a small species cannot shake the stars." On Earth, Admiral Catherine Morrison watched the speech from her home. She was 70 years old now, her hair white, her body tired. But her eyes still held the fire that had carried humanity through its darkest hour. On her desk sat a photograph of President Daniel Harris, smiling and kind, taken just weeks before his death. Next to it was a letter he had written her long ago, back when the Vraxian threat was still just a possibility. "If the worst happens," he had written, "I trust you to do what is necessary. But I also trust you to remember who we are. We are not conquerors. We are not destroyers. We are builders. We are dreamers. Whatever you must do, please do not lose that." Morrison closed her eyes and smiled. "We kept our promise, sir," she whispered to the photograph. "We showed them our strength. And then we showed them our mercy. They will never forget either one." Outside her window, the sun was setting over a peaceful Earth. Ships moved through the sky, human and alien, trading and exploring and building together. The tempest had passed, but its memory remained, carved into the history of the galaxy forever. A reminder that some species are not what they appear to be, and that humanity, when united, could shake the stars themselves.